Joining us today for the third in our series of 3 student development sessions for this semester. You may recall in January, we had Ethan Andrews, a librarian at the University of Mary, Welder Library, and Ethan shared with us on how to complete comprehensive literature searches, and he informed students of the many resources available through the library. Our second session was just last week. Dr. Madler presented on that. She graciously shared her time to provide information on the creation, organization, and purpose of an electronic professional portfolio. Both of those sessions were recorded, as will this one. Please refer back to emails that were sent out after the sessions for those recordings. Today, we are grateful to have Claudia Dietrich with us. Claudia has served as faculty for our MSN, Nursing Leadership and Management, and our MSN MBA Healthcare Administration programs since 2010. She's had many years of managerial and healthcare experience, and we truly consider her an expert in helping students navigate the evidence-based practice courses. Because students in these classes collaborate on their project, it is important that they understand and know how to function effectively as a team, which we know has pros and cons, but Claudia certainly helps our students navigate through this. Whether in the leadership and management program or dual degree or any other graduate program, you will likely encounter project work during your time with us. And so, as most of you will be serving as a leader in some capacity upon graduation and after, we thought this was an important one to learn some tips and tricks of the trade. So with that, please welcome Claudia Dietrich as she presents tips for creating a well-functioning team.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Now, is this session going to be recorded? Are you recording or?
It looks like it is, Claudia.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet.
As we do always at the beginning of all meetings at University of Mary, I'm going to begin with an opening prayer. And this one is just entitled, Give Thanks or Gratitude in Everything. And the scripture verse that it's based on is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. So let us pray. If all of us could just take a deep breath collectively and then release it and just bring our spirits into this time and space and with this group of people. So let's just take a deep breath. So let us pray. Gracious God, the giver of all gifts, help me to awaken to all the gifts in my life. Give me a grateful spirit, a spirit of loving kindness, so that I notice how blessed I am. May I be filled with gratitude to you. May I also be willing to thank those around me who often are the source of blessing to me, even when I fail to notice. May I enjoy the many gifts of everyday life. So thank you, Dr. Lassiter, for that introduction. And I do have to give credit to Dr. Billy Madler when I am doing this presentation because of our work that we've done over all of these years together. I do believe that we've created very strong programs in the Nursing Leadership and Management program and in the MSN MBA. And I will begin by just telling you that teamwork is one of the most important parts of these capstone courses. I have been responsible for these 3 courses for the last over 12 years. And the teamwork aspect of it, we have learned, has just become one of the incredibly strong areas that we hope to develop with students and that we do see developed with students. So in these courses, let me just give you a broad brush overview. These are considered capstone courses for these two programs. And the students over 2 contiguous semesters, so that's 15 weeks per semester, 30 weeks total, they work on a project with a team of students, usually 2 or 3 other students, and they partner with an organization, a healthcare organization. They learn from the organization what the major needs are or what the request of the leadership is at the organization for a major change initiative that is generally tied to the strategic planning of the organization. So in an essence, that's what the students do. They partner with an organization, they plan an implementation, a measurement plan, and then they actually implement, they measure, and they disseminate outcomes of the evidence-based practice project. Okay, why are these not advancing? Okay, there. So the objectives for this session, by the end of this session, the participants will be able to identify their best and worst team experiences. Hopefully you'll be able to cite some of the tips that I'm going to share with you for effective leadership. I'm going to review a tool that we've developed, and that was where Dr. Madler and I worked together very closely on this. It was the peer, excuse me, let me go back. The peer and self-assessment of team members' participation. And this is a document that is utilized by University of Mary graduate programs. And I am going to review previous student pearls so that we can learn what previous students may have to say about their experience. So what I want to do to get started, and I believe there's a very small group, so I don't know that we're going to be able to do an actual brainstorming activity, although we possibly will. I'd really like to just give you a minute or two to reflect on what have been some of your best experiences working on a team, and possibly what have been your worst experiences, or those experiences, we might even call them learning experiences because we learn from everything. So is there something, so let's just take a moment, let's pause. And I know I'll be brainstorming, and I'd ask Dr. Lassiter, Dr. Madler, and the 2 or 3 students who have joined, and thank you very much for joining, just to pause and consider, and especially if those that are listening to this recording, consider what some of those have been for you. So what I am going to do, I'm going to pull myself out of this so that I can actually type. I am going to ask people if you would just unmute yourself and possibly shout out a phrase or a term or a word that describes the best experiences or the worst. Let's do the best first. Joanne or Dr. Lassiter, I see that you unmuted yourself.
Or communication.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Equality with the workload and working in a team.
Equality, yes. Excellent. That's
Having
a big one.
Yeah, having a defined plan and strategy.
Yes.
And then
Shared
having a
vision, Claudia.
Yeah.
Shared vision, excellent. And what else were you going to say?
Oh, yep. I was going to say having a strong leader when it comes to teams that have.
Okay, good. Excellent. And that was Jess, correct? Thanks, Jess.
Yep.
Anyone else have any other ideas? I'm going to add
Commitment.
mine. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say commitment / accountability.
Yes. Yes, and that certainly aligns with what I had written down. Everyone is engaged and contributes. So,
And I think also some of my best experiences have been when we've had diverse expertise.
That was the word that was in my head too, was diversity.
thank you. I love that you're actually, you guys are giving my talk. This is excellent. Anything else you'd like to throw up there?
The last thing that I would say is, or one of the other things I would say for me that is that I really appreciate is when you have, I don't know what the right word is I'm looking for, Claudia, you'll probably be able to help me, but a certain level of maturity / professionalism, and that there can be respective challenge to ideas that
Excellent.
Are not perceived as insults or
Excellent. Actually,
Constructive criticism.
yes,
That's kind of what it
excellent.
came out. Yeah, as you were
Yeah.
talking about that, like being able to actually speak up in the meeting without fear,
Yes,
when
excellent.
you're on a team. Because
Yes,
sometimes having too strong of a leader makes that a problem.
yes.
Mhm.
And I don't know who contributed that, but thank you so much. Was that you, Rhonda, or was that Jess? I guess it
That was
doesn't.
Jess. I think that
Thank
was-
you. Thank you. Rhonda, did you have something to say? I saw that your mic was unmuted. And thanks for joining us. All right. What about the worst? Let's kind of, because if we really think of the worst experiences, when I work with students, I always say, gosh, these are some of our very best learning experiences or opportunities. So worst.
The opposite of everything on the left.
That's what I was going to say. as well.
Okay.
I
The
think
biggest pet peeve is lack
undervalued.
of
I think
communication. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
yeah, absolutely agree with you, Jess. Under communicate, well, even or miscommunication. I mean, or misperceived communication can go wrong so many ways.
Yes.
But I was also going to add, that, and this lends itself from communication. I think sometimes in some of the most challenging experiences we've had, Claudia, I think in terms of trying to help students navigate teamwork is when perhaps there is a lack of understanding or appreciation for another team member's position, or what they might be experiencing both within the work of the team, but also what factors might be influencing them outside of the team.
Mm. Yes. Yes. Outside factors. Absolutely. And stressors. And the inability to recognize that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or appreciate or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That about that person. Thank you.
One thing-
Anything else? that
That's
I was
what I
gonna-
was. Oh,
yeah.
go, Jess.
Oh no, I was just gonna say one of the biggest things I'm having right now is lack of being prepared for
Okay.
like team meetings and stuff. I run a lot of service lines at work, and lately one of the biggest
Mhm.
issues is people aren't prepared for the meeting when it's been
Yes.
planned for weeks and months in advance. And then I
Yes.
have to reschedule.
Yes.
So, and that kind of ties into the communication too, because I try to
Yes.
make sure to send out like meeting reminders and agendas and things like that. So when a team has like an understanding of whose roles or what, and so sometimes like the roles aren't clear. And I
Yes.
think, yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
I think personal
go ahead.
agendas, sometimes people come to a team and they have a personal agenda that's not necessarily doesn't contribute to the overall purpose of the team.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are all wonderful. And thank you. I see a few more students are joining, so thank you so much for joining. I'll go back then to the presentation, and we've developed quite a list. And actually, like I said, you've really covered a lot of what I'm planning to cover. I do want to talk about the fact that my presentation is really going to talk a lot about, I'm doing this presentation in the context of the student capstone, the graduate student capstone experiences. So that's the context of where I'm coming from with this. Have you ever wondered how some teams exhibit effective teamwork and other teams remain dysfunctional throughout the entire life of that team? And the one thing that I have found, and I think most of you have probably found, is that effective leadership is both profoundly simple and difficult at the same time. And one of the things that the success of a team can really be tied to is the culture of the organization. So again, when I'm thinking of the context of the graduate student working on a capstone project within an organization, so that partnering organization's culture will really impact the team, as well as the academic culture. So University of Mary, our culture can impact the student. So hopefully for the better, University of Mary, because with our Benedictine values and the servant leadership philosophy, that we are hoping will definitely impact the leader, the students. And I will tell you from experience, having worked at University of Mary since 2010, that we have a very strong teamwork ethic. So here's the thing that's, it kind of goes without saying, but people are the joy and the problem in teamwork, right? It's the people. So no matter what the team does or the reason that it's getting together, human beings are in the mix. And each team member brings all of their own baggage, for good or for not so good. And we sort of alluded to that already on some of our bullet points here. So we've got very diverse people, hopefully, coming together. They're bringing different life experiences, uncommon, so diverse work experiences and varying degrees of success. And they've worked with former teams, so they're bringing some of that baggage into the teamwork. So this group that is being newly formed, this team, needs to come together to meld the diversity and appreciate the diversity, and at the same time converge around a new mission. So, and just as you pointed out, and I think that was one of the students, Jess, who mentioned best experiences, communication. That's what we found, is that communication. So that's my first tip. Communicate, communicate, communicate. The teams that I work have to early on determine exactly how their communication patterns are going to be, and they have to agree to those up front. So if they're, for instance, and we'll be talking about this in a bit, but they're going to develop team norms. And one of the things that they will usually talk about is that we agree to communicate by email and answer emails within X amount of time, answer texts within X amount of time, and create a weekly team meeting so that our team can do a huddle. So I've thrown in, and I'm just kind of going to pepper in previous student pearls, and these were delightful for me to come up with, actually from a discussion forum that we have with students. And we asked students about their pearls. What did they learn in these projects? And one of the students says communication is vital for success. So the team really, I would hold out that the team can't be successful without communication. So as we all know, poor communication impacts or hinders every aspect of our life. So when you have effective leadership, or excuse me, communication, as Aristotle once said, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. The other thing I would say about this, I know I've really appreciated with some of my colleagues, and two of my colleagues are here. where I feel that I've had great synergy over the years. And so we have learned that the whole is better than the sum of its parts just because of our working together. So skillful communication creates awareness and understanding. It enables team members to complete their tasks efficiently. And it's really important that that skillful communication really does include the art of listening. I always share with students around this. Oops, excuse me. I grew up in a family where people talked a lot, and they talked over the top of people. And I remember when I came to nursing school, that's one of the things I had to learn, was actually learn that art of listening. And I remember very specifically that that was one of those key skills that we learned in our basic nursing curriculum. The other thing, when a team first comes together, you might even take the time to do a little exercise like we just did, where we talked about what are the skills that people come to the team with. So, you know, consider doing exercises like that, of the best and worst team experiences. One of the students recently mentioned fears and expectations. So to actually plot out what are the fears and what are the expectations of each team member. Remember that spoken word versus written word is very important. One of my very best stories that I have about this is a colleague that I worked with who was just the most wonderful human being on the planet. She was one of my very best friends, plus a colleague, and she died tragically at a young age. But we had worked together one summer in a nurse practitioner program course, and I found her email communication to be very curt and almost rude, bordering on rude. At least that's the way I perceived it. And finally, after several days, I just picked up the phone and I said, gosh, is there something going on that I'm not aware of? Are you upset with me for something? And she said, oh my goodness, why would you think that? And I was able to share with her, it was your email style. And I was so shocked by that, because in person, she's very warm and fuzzy and was just one of these very kind individuals. But at times her email communication could be very curt and terse, I would say. So at least that's how I perceived it. So anyway, that's a good experience that I had, just having to check in. So spoken word versus emails. And we all know that the spoken word, that's one of the benefits of having face-to-face meetings, or even substituting with technology meetings, as many of us have to. We can at least see some body language. And we really want to encourage your team to talk. So just really encouraging, again, those regular meetings with Zoom, Skype, wherever body language can actually be observed. So good communication actually creates a safe working environment, and this will lead to healthy group climate and effective team norms. So that is my number one tip. So tip number 2, oops, and here's a pearl, and I'll just read this one since it's long. Having open communication with each other and regular meetings allowed us to stay on task and achieve our goals in a timely manner. This communication and collaboration also allowed for us to openly discuss concerns and share opinions or feedback with each other as our project evolved. I might ask the audience to help me with reading those pearls in the future. So, and this is the next important tip, is that the team needs to define roles and responsibilities. And we actually add, oops, excuse me, I keep wanting to click on these words. We add team norms and to that list of what we ask teams to do very early in the team formation. And what this does, it reduces duplicated work, It will help decrease conflict and that last minute scrambling that can take place. Or as somebody even mentioned earlier, not coming to the meetings prepared, so finger pointing. So if we all agree, so when a team is performing at its very best, you will usually find that each team member has clear responsibilities, that each person is clear on who's going to do what, who's going to collaborate with whom, and who's going to contribute the deliverables. And it's also important to share responsibilities or pick up the slack if somebody is absent or unable to complete their task on time. So that whole shared responsibility, sharing duties and helping others when needed. So again, I would just kind of close out this little section with saying that without clarity, team cohesiveness and effectiveness is compromised. So another thing, and this was addressed when we did our little brainstorming, is that teams can become unbalanced if all team members have similar styles of behavior. And if we have similar weaknesses, likewise, the team as a whole may tend to have that weakness. So that's why, and you'll find that if team members have similar strengths, they might compete rather than cooperate, and that really can hurt the team as well. So given the complexity, I'll just read this little statement, given the complexity of forming a team, including consciously or unconsciously developing team interaction norms and guidelines. Now notice, it says that if we don't consciously develop those roles, responsibilities, and team norms, it will be done unconsciously. Isn't that fascinating? So consciously or unconsciously developing team interaction norms and guidelines. The fact that we even end up with effective functioning teams is downright amazing. And really it is, when you think of all the complexity of it. But I will tell you, in my experience, and I guess I would ask for the other faculty to chime in here, but I have found that probably 80 to 90% of the teams that I work with function very well, and they're very efficient. So I don't know if we've done a particularly good job of educating students or just because we place value on that. But I guess I would just open it up briefly and ask you if that's been your experience as well.
Do you mean specifically in relationship to our work as faculty with student groups or our own
Yes.
personal experience? Yeah.
Yes, with student groups. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm always thinking of it within the context for me of the capstone courses. So I just was
Yeah.
wondering when you've worked with student teams, what you have found. I have found that probably 80% or
Mhm.
much higher than that even. I usually only have to get involved with teams probably, I would say, 5% or less of the time.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. And then it seems like the ones that turn south, it takes a lot of repair. It takes more work or more guidance to help rebuild and patch together that team. But I agree, most do really well. In fact, there are some instances where the teams, some of the teams I'm thinking about have faced such great adversity with, project ideas falling off, project settings kind of being pulled out from underneath their feet, when this is a high stakes endeavor for them, for students, in regards to their trajectory to graduation, financially, mentally, all of those things. And I have been so impressed, particularly in those situations where the adversity is pretty significant.
Thank you, Dr. Madler. Dr. Lassiter, what has been your experience?
Yeah, I think back of some of some of the groups that have had some challenges. And I think it goes back to your pros and cons of our exercise that we did earlier. What makes an effective team? And, miscommunication and sometimes just coming down to one person of just not really understanding, like Billy said, the scope and the magnitude of the project. What does this project really mean? And I think sometimes too, if it's not that individual that is working currently at that organization, that misunderstanding is there to say, this really means a lot to both us as a team and what we're doing for academia, but also more importantly for the organization. And so it just takes a little bit of redirecting with the group and just re-talking through the magnitude of the project scope and the highlights and benefits that's going to happen at the end. And then I've seen a turnaround from there. It just needs a little
Wonderful.
navigation through that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joanne. I see Dr. Herman has joined as well. So if you have any comments, Jenna, from your experience mentoring teams, if you wish to add. And we'll come back. All right, thanks. So the next tip, let's talk about oops. Okay, here is Pearl. Let's see. Could I get Rhonda? Would you be willing to unmute and read that one?
Yes. Early on, our team developed a project timeline and plan. As a part of this plan, we identified our individual roles and a time frame to achieve each objective.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. So my next tip, develop, and this really aligns with previously a little bit with developing the purpose and goals. So the team needs to be very clear about its missions and goals. A team really can't exist without a common goal. So you need to make sure again that this is defined. What is your team supposed to deliver? Map out the actions that will be needed by going backwards from your desired outcome, and then set those deadlines for each step. Giving voice to each team member will give you the best shot at getting commitment and clarity of purpose. So again, each member of the team needs to give voice. And that can sometimes be challenging, because if you have quite a few introverts on your team, to tease out their wisdom is really your job as maybe the more vocal team member. I have learned in my lifetime that introverts, or people who are quieter, really probably have a lot of wisdom to share, but those of us who are more vocal need to really work with them to get that wisdom out. So who will manage? That's a really important part. Who will manage the work in each step, and enlist the people that will be needed in each step. Communicate this very clearly with your team, or the team needs to communicate and work towards achieving those objectives. Theta, are you able to unmute and read the next student, Pearl, please?
Yes, keeping
Thank you.
organized. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Keeping organized and on task from the start allowed for a steady progression of the project and successful implementation. And that was a previous student, Pearl.
Thank you so much for that. The tip number 4 is decide on leadership. And like I'm tickled that we, so many of the students, or the people who were joined when we did our brainstorming, They actually hit on most of these. So decide on your leadership. And we're going to recommend that a participative leadership is used. In terms of leading meetings, assigning tasks, recording decisions and commitments that have been made, assessing progress, holding members accountable. So just committing to active participation. Sorry, I'm trying to remove some of these.
Claudia, I just have to, while you're doing that, I don't mean
Yes.
to interrupt you or disrupt your flow, but I want to just emphasize this, and that it is one of your incredible strengths and something you've mentored me so much in, that oftentimes when you're in a leadership role, there are so many things that you're working on that if you know, I kind of relate it back to documentation in the hospital. You know, if it's not documented, it wasn't done. And just even that day to day, Claudia and I have a list that she's been keeping since 2010 in our work together. And I don't know how many pages it is right now, but oftentimes we would sit down together in our work, and we would be able to look at our list. We'd be able to prioritize. We'd check off what we'd accomplished. We'd have record of what we had done and kind of a timeline of when it was done. And so then when you get to the point, oftentimes as leaders do, or teams of people do, and you need to provide artifacts for outside bodies about what you've accomplished, this pearl of recording decisions, recording commitments, recording timelines, recording tasks is so pragmatic, but so important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because actually, my students have found that they almost need one person to be a secretary for the meetings and jot down what have been the commitments. And that again helps hold members accountable. So thank you so much for that. What we have found with our teams for the capstone courses is that the leadership style can actually kind of rotate. It ends up being that the student who is the liaison into the organization, so they're an actual employee at the organization and they become a liaison between the organization and the team. Oftentimes they end up taking that leadership role, but usually somebody on the team evolves as that leader, and that's their skill set. So it's important to learn how to be both the leader as well as the follower. So the next tip, establish relationships. This is very important right from the get-go in the life of a team. You really need to view your teammates as unique individuals, unique people. So as a team member, do you really know your team? What are their skill sets and their strengths and weaknesses? And what motivates them? It really is important as very invaluable information actually, because it enables the matching of expertise to specific tasks that will help increase productivity and job satisfaction. And a valued teammate is a happy one. And this attitude of happiness or valuing will resonate throughout the entire team. And this tip number, here's another student pool. Pearl. Haley, could I call on you, please, to unmute and read that one? All right, I'll just read this one then. Thank you. Despite the challenges we encountered, we were able to work through them and determine next steps that would best support the project. And I love that. Despite the challenges, we were able to work through those. Haley might not have been able to unmute herself. All right. So this next one goes hand in hand, building.
I love that so much, Claudia. Can you go back to that just a moment
Yes,
for me? I'm so
can.
sorry. I can't hold myself quiet, but
That's okay.
I think about this in those words, despite challenges, we worked through them. And so I think that's so important in a team, that you feel that it's almost like a family, like you feel that sense of commitment to one another, like you're going to walk through this together. You lock arms and you figure out a way.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that you're clarifying some of these points, because that is really critical. That I've had a lot of teams that have had to work through a lot of big challenges, and they just work through them, and that's part of the work of the team. That's probably 50% of the project is the teamwork. So tip number 6 goes along with the previous one on building relationships. So as the team continues to grow, you're really going to want to build those solid relationships. And as the team advances in its abilities to handle interpersonal relationships and focusing on those interpersonal relationships, you will find that you really will be able to problem solve and and solve conflicts even within the team. So it's until that a team starts, and it's that whole forming, norming process that teams go through. Until we start working together, it's very difficult to see what's going to work and what's not going to work. So interpersonal relationships are really going to be key to the success of the team. And that ties back to people being both the good part and the challenge, right? So scrutinize how your team works together. Really spend time observing, listening, and communicating. And remember, communicating involves that listening. Certainly there will be conflicts. We expect there to be conflicts and conflicting opinions. And actually, if you don't have conflicting opinions, the team probably isn't very healthy. So whenever you have that conflict that starts the opinion conflicts, that's actually healthy, because it shows that element of passion about the work and that the importance of the work that the team is undertaking. So one thing to consider as a team member is to act as a mediator. So possibly to flip issues into a positive. So just take a situation like the previous Pearl stated, we had conflict or whatever, challenges. So flipping those issues into something positive or brainstorming solutions. And it really does take time. We have to take time to share our experiences and perspectives on those challenges that lie ahead. And it was recommended on one of the websites that I toured to, mix activities. So brainstorming, problem solving, even considering some recreational challenges. And again, if the team does all of these things, hopefully, teamwork issues and problems and conflicts can easily, the team can come together and resolve those. So here's a student Pearl. Provide a clear focus for solving problems and resolving conflicts. So right up front, this student is suggesting have a clear focus for how you're going to, how the team is going to work on solving problems and resolving those conflicts. Here's another student, Pearl. Let's see. Jenna, are you with us? Are you able to unmute? And I don't see her unmuting. So Joanne, would you be willing to read that one, please?
Sure. Ask the right questions early on so there are no surprises in the end. When it came to implementation, our team developed a timeline. If there is a reasonable reason for a delay and it is out of your hands, go with the flow.
And I just love these quotes because they are direct quotes from student discussion forums. So I love to share these with people. So the 7th tip, and I'll keep moving along here. making decisions together. The team, as we begin to make more decisions, really is able to make high quality decisions as a team. And the team environment actually encourages reasonable risks, not high level risks, but reasonable risks. So making decisions should be based on an open dialogue with all team members in that open environment where they feel able to offer their ideas and solutions. Each member should have their team support and commitment, not only when making the decision, but when carrying it out. And one thing that's really important, when there's really important decisions to be made, make sure the entire team is included. I have had situations where possibly a team member just felt very compelled to move forward with something without informing the rest of the team members. And it ended up to be a really important decision. So leaving everyone needs to be included in those important decisions. And that helps empower each member then, if they think that what they're contributing is important. And also, other people might have something to contribute that you hadn't even thought of. That's that whole synergy idea, that the total the total is more than the sum of its parts. Here's another student pearl. Billy, would you be willing to read that one?
Absolutely. Excuse me, I just put a bite of food in my mouth. It is important to realize that it may not go as planned, but to seek out new pathways to get to the same finish line.
Again, aren't those are exquisite wisdom, I feel like, for current students or students who will be doing these capstone courses, to hear some of the previous student pearls. Okay, tip number 8 is celebrate successes. What happens when your team experiences success? Do you actually take the time to acknowledge that it's been achieved, or does it just kind of disappear into that abyss of, oh well, that was a small one, let's move on to the next big challenge? So do you take time as a team to share a quick well done and then just return to business as usual, or do you take the time to actually share a win? So don't miss those wins. Even the small ones are, some of the experts are suggesting, and I found that even the teams that I work with, they do share their wins. And I've had teams that have ended up telling me that they've become best friends for life with these team members, and they would even take trips together. So again, celebrating those wins. What happens when you do take time to celebrate is that it inspires the team to greater success. I know at the University of Mary and the Division of Nursing, we often do celebrations around food. So when it's just time to pause and maybe celebrate a win or just something, or just celebrate one another, we will have a little gathering that involves some food. Tip number 9, or no, here's another student pearl. Would someone want to read that one, please? Rhonda, could I ask you, please? Are you still with us? Sometimes we get busy, don't we?
I can do it, Claudia.
Okay, thank you, Theta.
Actually, it's
Okay.
Joanne.
Rhonda.
I didn't even know it was Joanne.
Oh, Joanne, thank you.
Sure. Your final project may not have the information and results that you were expecting during the planning and developing stage, but that information is still important.
Thank you, Joanne. It just breaks up not having to listen to me all the time, right? So number 9, This is actually to continually review your team processes. And this is really considered CQI. So really take the time to just stop once in a while, take a time out and ask questions. So the team will openly discuss team norms, hopefully, and that's ongoing. You might have to adjust those team norms. Your team's progress should be regularly reviewed. So what's stopping the team from moving forward? This is where constructive feedback is really important here. And any issues or conflicts should be dealt with in a timely manner. So don't let that anger build up or some resentment build up over time without bringing that forward. Okay, I guess that's about all I'd like to say for that one. So just taking the time for continuously reviewing your team processes. If there is a barrier or change in plans, use that to help create your project into something better and more useful. What a beautiful piece of wisdom. And my very last tip, and I want to take time to review the tool that we have put together or developed. My last one is tip number 10 is to determine the need for facilitated or outside coaching. So sometimes you might need input from a third party. So I've even been involved with work teams where we've had to bring in a consultant to help with that. If your team is just not working cohesively together, and instead of focusing on the problems, team members could maybe begin to describe what are their what are their roles, and what would their teamwork look like in an ideal world. The outside facilitator, and in this case, when I'm talking about student teams working on a capstone project, oftentimes that becomes the faculty member. We really do ask the student teams to work out their issues within themselves because that's part of the learning. But every now and then there is that need, it's determined that there's a need for that outside help or coaching by the faculty member. And really one of the first things that the faculty member probably will do is ask each member of the team to describe what are the issues, what are the problems, and possibly just that whole thing about what each team member, what their roles are, and what their teamwork would look like in an ideal world. So those would be some of the strategies that I might use if I'm working with a team that's having difficulty. So those are my tips. I'm going to just pause for a little bit. We have a few more minutes, and then I do want to move on to just reviewing the tool a bit that we've developed and we're using. But does anyone have anything that they would like to comment on based on these tips?
Hey, Claudia, it's Jenna. I just wanted to say this is a fantastic student development session. And it's, as you had said, sometimes it's nice to break it up to have other people say things. We say some of these things, but it's really nice to hear it from you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Herman. Appreciate your feedback. So I guess we should maybe flip back. Let's see, whoops, we'll flip back to our list at the very beginning and see how we did. I think we covered, yes.
I just wanted to add too.
Go ahead.
Our faculty, and this is good for us to hear again as well, and our roles as faculty and as leaders, and is really kind of many times role models to our students. You know, we can get, we forget that how we model ourselves and the behaviors and the coaching that we provide, how this really is important for the student's career. And I'm having a hard time saying what I want to say, but we oftentimes get into the the competencies associated with more task related things and, critiquing evidence and, understanding physiologic processes and that kind of thing. And we sometimes fail to recognize that the competence of being able to manage change and build teams and to communicate and resolve conflict are equally, if not more important oftentimes than those other competencies, yet they're the hardest to achieve.
Excellent. Exactly. So again, I just kind of reflecting on this this little exercise that we did. I really think we covered almost every one of these. Would you agree? And any other comments anyone would want to make before we take time to review that tool? All right. Oh, I see I have about 4 minutes to do that. So I am going to switch over to my tool. Okay. So this is and I really have to give a shout out to Dr. Billy Madler. Several years ago, we did decide to create, based on what we could find in the literature and even on the internet, we really played around a lot to develop something called a peer and self-assessment of team members' participation. And this was based on the fact that we want to hear honestly from students middle way through the course and at the end. So students repeat this survey 4 times over the 30 weeks that they're working together, or 2 semesters that they work together. And we've got just an opening statement, and I'm not going to, this is all included on the PowerPoint, by the way. But I just thought I'd open up a larger document so you could see that. A nurse leader's responsibility really is to provide thoughtful and honest and relevant feedback to their peers and to subordinates and team members. So we ask students to fill this out. And they are asked to place their name. So they have to include their own name, and they have to rate themselves along with their own team members. And they rate them in these 7 areas that we have outlined below, using this continuum that should be very familiar to you. The exemplary to proficient category, the partially proficient, emerging, and does not meet expectations. So we've got these all nicely defined below. So students, this grid, so if I were able, and I don't know why I'm not able to type on here, but if I had my name and maybe Susie, Joanne, Billy, so maybe there's 4 of us team members, I would be rating each member of the team in these 7 areas, and I would be giving them either a 5, a 4. Hopefully we would fall in those categories. And most of the students do, by the way. And that does evolve because, let's admit, many of us are only partially proficient in certain areas. And then we actually have some narrative questions that we ask the students, and these are very telling as well. There are 6 questions, and we talk about, and I hear a lot of wonderful, and what I'm looking for when I review these as a faculty, I want to see if the 3 team members are saying similar things. And so I should be hearing the fact that they're saying pretty similar things. So they need to identify the planning, how they meet, what are their communication processes, describe key roles and specific contributions. Here's the key roles of other team members. So these should match, right? Everyone should have agreed, these are my roles, these are everyone else's roles. How's the equity going, or inequity of the workload? And I think Jess or somebody mentioned that earlier when we were doing our brainstorming. And here's the adequacy or inadequacy of input and feedback from each team member. And then we close with, should everyone in the group receive the same grade? Why or why not? So what would you recommend that the team members receive as grades? So all of these questions can be very telling along with this grid. So that is my presentation. That brings us to the end, and I think I'm only 1 minute over. So are there any questions or further comments that anyone would want to share?
Thank you for reviewing this tool, Claudia. And one other pearl I would share with faculty that either use this tool or are considering implementing it in coursework where they have groups working together is something I have observed with you and your students. But at times when you get this midterm or end of course, you're really surprised on occasion by the assessment of one of the teammates in a group, and have, take the time to call out to the student team members and identify, is this going to be a surprise to your team member, or have you communicated well, and really driving home the fact that if this is the sentiment and this is how you evaluate somebody at this point, then it shouldn't be a surprise to them. Right. This should be something you're communicating.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that. I could go on and tell another whole hour of stories of how that has unfolded. So you're absolutely right. I appreciate that you brought that forward, because it should not be a surprise, just like something shouldn't be held on to until a performance evaluation. If something needs to be talked about, it needs to be talked about as close to the time that it happened as possible. So it's the same challenge with teams. If they're willing to hang their fellow team member out to dry on, for instance, in the academic program, on a survey like this, and then if I go back, because I will do a lot of background work, I might do a phone call and have that conversation. Have you had this conversation with your teammate? Have you had that difficult or crucial conversation? And if not, let's talk that through and how you might say that. So we'll do coaching or how we might go about doing that, because I'm not going to get involved as a faculty member unless really the team has really worked hard to try to work it out. And I will tell you that as faculty, when I receive this information, I spend hours putting together an overview back to the student of what sort of an overview of what all the team comments were. Hopefully we're going to see that it's functioning as a well-functioning team. So
Claudia, I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to Dr. Madler for putting this together. As faculty, I can tell you that Dr. Herman and I implemented it in our project work, project courses, and it was especially helpful for me this spring. We had a little bit of a dysfunctioning team, but I made sure that this tool was completed. And so that helped to talk the team through, as I had to kind of facilitate them a little bit, but it wasn't me taking sides. It was actually documented by the team on who was falling down where. And again, it just helped to facilitate that conversation and not make it look like I'm picking on one particular person. So as a faculty member, it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. And I will tell you, based on that survey and the results, there have been students who on a team have received a little bit of a different grade. Generally, the students do receive the same grade working on a team together, but occasionally that's not the case. So, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the feedback. You helped strengthen what I had to say by your feedback. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you,
Claudia,
Claudia.
You're awesome. This almost should be kind of a recurring one every year.
No,
I agree.
thank you. I
Thank
appreciate the feedback.